go. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is this? Another randomness. That's what it is. Yep, Tears of the Kingdom is almost here. Salam, everyone. How are you? Likewise, I'm finishing Breath of the Wild as well. Let's see what we got here. Raven's Watch. I've heard about it. Let's see what I get. I'm actually preparing an academic presentation right now, and I'm trying to see if it's going to coordinate with what I'm doing here. I have a presentation I have to give on the 8th. So, yeah, I've been preparing that for like the last week. Nothing much. Just being myself and having fun and taking care of my family and working. That's basically all I've been doing. The presentation is, it's not a joke, but it's sort of done in a facetious manner. But the presentation is about how to write a paper at the last minute. So it's based in my academic series, The Procrastinator's Guide to Student Success. Believe it or not, that is actually a thing. So, and I'm teaching it. Yeah. No. Teaching at a university. Because I am a faculty member at a university. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. No, I'm not keeping the channel alive. What the heck? Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. I literally just got off work like an hour ago, so hence why I'm a little disheveled. Some people have tried to respond to it, but I think not well. And I'm not just saying that because I want it to work. I just don't think that their arguments really touch up on the implications of what I'm saying. So I prefer not to say because about where I work currently, because over the last few weeks, I've had some members of the so-called Muslim community online continuously try to hack my accounts. Recently, they got so far as to shut off my phone service and try to steal my phone number. And I had to resolve that. So that is still ongoing. Maybe funny for some of you, but it is a bit of an annoyance. Why? Because I disagree with their God. Not Allah, somebody else. Yes, they're still coming for me because I've been a little bit more active on my Facebook page, which is my personal Facebook page. It's not like something I want to advertise to people. It's whoever's my friend there or my follower there can just see what I write. And they have been a little bit angry and they think I'm going to come back and they don't want me to come back because that would disrupt things. So they're trying to harass me and intimidate me, and it's, whatever. Even though I continuously say I'm not coming back. So, I mean, you guys think I'm just making this stuff up, but I'm not. This has been going on for a few months now. The book, I have a basic structure in mind. I still haven't thought about. I mean, I have a title now, which is good. So I'm moving along. Or at least it's a placeholder title. It's a generic title. My daughter's doing very well. Alhamdulillah. She's in the living room as we speak, playing around, watching Omar and Hannah. And I am in here. Oh my God. Why are we asking about that? Yeah, so I did watch the debate to some extent because somebody told me that some of my research was being used in it, or at least some of my arguments were being used to justify certain conclusions that I would have never justified. And I saw it, and first off, I wasn't surprised about how bad the other party did. Both parties did pretty bad, but I was really upset that my research was being used to reach the conclusion that it's okay to have sex with minors in the contemporary period, when that was never my argument to begin with, nor is it a liberal argument. It's an argument that is based in our fiqh, in that we only marry people who are mature, or we only wait to get mature to marry, and that fluctuates throughout time. It's not something that's static. So it's not like it's okay today to marry somebody who reaches puberty, because that does fundamentally mess them up. Well, I mean, in most circumstances, there are always exceptions to the rule, but in some rural area somewhere. But in general, it's not a good thing to do that. It can actually cause a lot of problems for both parties if married too early, because we're not mentally, physically mature enough to take on certain things. And so it can be very harmful. And the scholars are very clear about this maxim that harm should be avoided at all costs. And we know as for a fact as well that they didn't set on a specific number or a specific quality with regards to marriageable age. They just assume that it's when you become physically or mentally mature, so that can fluctuate again throughout time, and it's also culturally dependent in some respects. So there's nothing liberal about that argument to say that it's better if people marry later today, right? There's nothing liberal about it all. That's an Islamic opinion, okay? And in fact, the whole thing about abstinence doesn't work. You're basically attacking the Quran, because the Quran says specifically, if you can't get married, then fast. Find other means not to engage in sexual activity. So yes, it does work. Abstinence does work. You don't just because a kid starts having an erection that you decide to get them married. They don't even understand what marriage means. And that's another problem that we have in our community that I find disturbing, especially among certain subcultures, is that marriage is considered just sexual release. Like, that's all we consider it is, it's a way to have sex and, to have an orgasm. That's halal. That's basically the only perception of marriage. The moment you get arousal, get married, because that's what marriage is about, is releasing your arousal, and it's like, no, marriage is more than that. It's also about taking care of a family. It's about being able to take care of yourselves. And a lot of people at 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, even though, yes, there is a lot of fornication today within Western societies, they cannot realistically get married because they will not be able to take care of themselves or a family. They can barely cook for themselves, for God's sake. You have 13-year-old girls out there that have no idea what's going on in the world. and boys as well. Like, and there are 20-year-old boys and girls, or men and women, who who don't even have a proper comprehension of themselves or the world around them, or even what it means to take care of a family. Yes, early marriage is encouraged to stay away from zina, but that cannot be the only solution. Also, fasting is a way to stay away from zina. Getting away from certain societies or being around certain people is a way to escape zina. Engaging, even though it may be a halal practice, but can lead to haram. For example, in a marriage that where two teenagers are married, two like 13-year-olds are married, and they are not prepared at all to take care of each other. They have no sense of responsibility. They have no sense of understanding how to take care of children. They can barely take care of themselves. And you marry these people, the likelihood of haram activities occurring within the marriage is increased dramatically. And what I mean by haram activities within the marriage is, I mean, the lack of respect for each other's rights, abuse on both sides, neglect, harm in other respects, and even like the possibility of zina itself occurring outside of that marriage as a result of the lack of understanding and responsibility and maturity that these two parties have. Because if you have two kids, not kids, but let's say two youngsters who are 13 years old, um, yes, fasting is a solution if you cannot get married. And a lot of these people cannot get married, realistically speaking. Let's be frank. There's a reason that you say you cannot get married. It's not simply for financial concerns. There's other reasons as well, right? Um, I'm trying to be clear about this because there are a lot of haram things that can occur when two irresponsible individuals, regardless of age, get married. And increasing that possibility is a problem. So, like, if you, for example, let me give you an example, Shoaib. If you get married, if you have a 13-year-old boy, you will say, okay, I don't want my son who's 13 to commit zina, and he's really aroused, like he's always horny. Okay, sorry to use that language, but just being frank. All right, I need to get him married ASAP. And his only perception of a woman is sexual pleasure. Do you think he's going to be loyal to her? Let's be honest. Do you really want somebody like that taking care of a child? But the thing is, most people that age don't even know what standards are for marriage. That's the problem. Yes, half of these kids don't even have jobs. Unless you're like a rich parent taking care of them. I mean, there's no chance in heck that that a 13-year-old kid's gonna survive in a contemporary society, in a Western society especially, or at least a technologically advanced, developed society, right? Like, okay, maybe in a rural place in Afghanistan, in the middle of nowhere, where the only thing they do is tend sheep, maybe. But in this society where you need a degree and stuff to survive, or you need at least like some professional experience, a 13-year-old is not going to be able to take care of his family. He's not going to be able to raise a family. He can't do anything. Like, why is he getting married? He can't take care of a family. So how does that mean that he is prepared for marriage? You see what I'm saying? Like, they were saying, well, so the whole argument in that debate was, oh, they're sexually aroused, therefore it's time to get married. It's like, no, there's more to being prepared for marriage than being sexually aroused. You know what I mean? Like, again, there are exceptions to every rule, but to suggest that this should be a standard, I'm sorry, that's ludicrous. Not to mention, let's say Bangladesh also has a lack of other things in society that make it untenable to have a lot of healthy marriages and healthy relationships in general. I mean, one of the biggest problems in Bangladesh today. I mean, Frank. Okay, let's be honest here too. Okay, I have a lot of Bangladeshi friends. I have a lot of Bangladeshi family members, in-laws, etc. That can tell you what Bangladesh society is, especially in rural areas. And it is not loyal marriages are, just normative. Okay. There's a lot of problems. And let me just put it that way. You have to be thrown the lion's den to learn things. Well, the problem with immaturity, Shoaib, is not not Shoaib. Sorry, Run. I'm coming for you. Okay, I don't know why that's your name, but whatever. If you, I feel like people have been thrown to lion's den to learn things. You can't keep the excuse everyone acts too mature. Sometimes you just have to get to thrown the responsibility to learn them. Okay, sure. But when society doesn't allow that to occur, when there's a system set up that doesn't allow that to occur, you can't throw them anywhere. There's nowhere to throw them. Number two, um, immaturity. What I mean by immaturity is not necessarily being childish per se. It means that they're not um, equipped to comprehend the complexities of the societies in which they live in, and that takes time. Um, you know, so if you live in a more complex society, it takes longer for you to prepare yourself for that society economically, socially, intellectually, etc. That's why we have like 12 years of primary education now, right? In most societies, because most societies require at least that for a minimum of comprehension to function in the adult world, even though we would not technically say that 18 is as mature as a 30-year-old, for example. Um, but we would say that that's mature enough at least to function at a minimum, right? And even then, you have a lot of people at that age who cannot marry because they're just ridiculously stupid. Um, the well, first off, we shouldn't. First off, the whole issue with early marriage is has nothing to do. First off, we should not structure society around marriage itself. I'm sorry, I know that sounds strange, but at the time that we get married, okay, the scholars didn't do that. The reason that early marriage was a thing back 1400 years ago, primarily as a standard, was because society was capable of doing that and people were functioning at that level, not because they were better than us per se in terms of their biological and social fitness, but because they had a lot less to deal with in terms of the complexities of society and functioning within that society. Like you had like at most what like 5 jobs that could be performed, that could be learned and performed within a few years. You then you had to prepare yourself for warfare and having families. You didn't live very long. Most people lived to their 30s and 40s, the average at least. I mean, there was a justification for that, and people weren't considered minors back then for being that young. They were adults by the time they hit puberty most of the time, because that was when you started life. Nowadays, we live in like average into our late 60s, 70s, even up to the 80s now in many societies. We have a lengthier state of education because we have more advanced jobs to perform. We have a much more complex society, more technologically advanced. Um, Medicine is more advanced, etc. Everything is more advanced. So it's not like if you were to like say, hey, a 13-year-old can function the same as a 30-year-old by a standard. And again, there are exceptions, but we're not making the exception the rule here. I would say that that's insane. I'm not saying you specifically. I'm saying to those individuals, like that's not possible. You could say, let's throw a 13-year-old into a lion's den, but if we throw a 13-year-old into New York City, he won't survive without adults helping him survive. He will be killed. Like that's just he will die starving on the street. Like they're like, what are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? And then you're like, oh, let's get this guy married. If he can't survive in the city by himself, he shouldn't be getting married. That's all I have to say. Right. It's like, no, when my boys turn 13, they're gonna get married. Bro, they can't even probably survive in the backyard for 3 days without your assistance. They're not gonna function. Okay. Like they have to call their mom for food and you want them to get married? Like, are you joking? Like, like mom, can you make me spaghetti? I can't live. My wife needs food. We're having lots of sex, but we can't feed the babies. That's literally what's going to happen. So it's unrealistic. It's just setting them up for failure. Let me tell you something. I've seen a lot of Muslim boys and girls, and even though I don't know them personally, I can't look into their hearts and I can't see their secrets. I can tell you there's been a lot of virgin men and women out there in the United States and Europe who are Muslim who make it just fine until marriage because they find other ways to survive in that climate, to live amongst friends and family members who will not engage in those activities. They learn how to leave those things behind and not look at them and not be tempted by them, and they fast and they practice and they're around good people, right? That's what they do, right? And they have been able to manage to save themselves for marriage up until their 20s. If they can do it, I'm pretty sure other people can too. Just being frank. I think a 16, 17-year-old will change significantly when they become a father, yes, but I still don't think that they're adequately prepared to take care of that family. I think the Christian was very forceful in that debate. I think that they misinterpreted some of those studies quite clearly, but at the same time, I think their position was stronger, not simply because I don't like the other side. I hate both of them, actually. I think they're both pretty bad arguers and debaters in general. But I think the other side had a better position because I think that the Muslim side inadequately represented our position fiqh-wise as well as scientifically. And I think that it was more embarrassing for us than, it made us look bad. Let me just put it that way. The Muslim community looks really bad now as a result of that. Obviously not everyone sees these debates, but in terms of online, it made us look really bad. No, a 13-year-old boy, 100 years ago could probably survive better in society than one today. Yes, of course. I don't want to debate anyone. I want to play Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, take care of my daughter, and work and teach people. That's my job. I have no interest in debating people. That's a waste of time now. I might do it for fun, but I don't see the point in that either, except to be for fun, and that's not really a good reason to do it. A lot. I mean, like, I've noticed that a lot of these arguments are coming. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. There is another extreme. Yeah, there's some adults who don't even grow up. And again, that's a fault of society as well, a fault of the parenting. There's a fault of a lot of things. I mean, like I said, there's always exceptions to rules. I'm talking about the standards. I am taking active legal measures to protect myself. Yes, I am. Physically, I'm not, and me and my family are fine. I don't think anyone would try to harm us physically, and I prepared myself to protect myself if necessary from that. And but financially, otherwise, they are trying to harm me. One of the things, though, is like I notice a lot of these kids online now, and I call them kids because mentally speaking, they act like children. They're using a lot of these evolutionary psychological arguments, which are not even properly presented. Like if you want to have a proper understanding of maturity and stuff, read my paper from Yakin Institute regarding Aisha's age, and I think you'll better understand what that means, what the evolutionary argument is behind it. Most of you have already, but I think that's the most proper argument there. But also when it comes to like even things like they're misapplying certain evolutionary principles to human beings, even that come from animals, which is a fallacy in and of itself. And that's what a lot of atheists do, by the way. And they're also ironically using evolutionary psychology while at the same time denouncing evolution as a theory, which again makes no sense to me. Yeah, I'm not going to look at the leaks. I'm holding back on them. I've seen enough. The trailer was awesome. It's terrible. It's disgusting. Like, I would never marry my daughter at that age. Like, of course she would not be well as a result of that. She would not benefit from that at all. Maybe 1400 years ago she would, but not today. So my point is, though, for example, even the whole like mate guarding thing, you're hearing this a lot now online Twitter. People saying that hijab is about mate guarding. We talked about this before in last stream, right? That's ludicrous. Hijab has nothing to do with mate guarding. That's just ludicrous. Hijab is a woman's honor in and of itself. It's commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the sake of one person not being able to take another person. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, I put this hijab on you so that your husband or your father claims you and is now known as your property, and nobody else can take you. That's not the purpose of the hijab. And anyone who thinks it is completely backwards on comprehending what the hijab is about. Well, when I was talking about advancement, I'm talking about khidr, I'm talking about like complexity of society. I'm not necessarily talking about length of age. Um, yes, Ibn Omar was only 15 when he participated in this. Okay, sure. I haven't not seen the Mario movie yet. Yeah, I know who they are, but they're operating from Canada and Bangladesh and Pakistan. Uh, what do you think of idealism? I think it's too ideal. I am author, yes. No, it's not even that because like it's like also you think about it, it's like so you're saying when a father enforces his daughter to wear hijab that he's mate guarding her? Astaghfirullah. That's disgusting. Or that he's only doing it to make sure that her future husband only claims her. Like that's not the point of hijab. Like astaghfirullah, that's it's not only sexualizing, it's also kind of demeaning because yes, it protects a woman's modesty, but even if she never gets married, it's always going to protect her modesty. It's always even when she's married, not married, or when she's married, it protects her modesty. It has nothing to do with her husband. Like it is valued despite her husband, or if she has one or not. Like it how can it be mate guarding? That's disgusting. Like no, mate guarding for us is simply protecting our wife. Um, you're right. You know what I'm saying? Like if I mate guard, I'm not even really mate guarding. I'm just protecting her. Like I'm not trying to protect her because I don't want other people to have her. I'm protecting her because I love her and I'm taking care of her. Right. You know what I mean? Like Khidr, I think it's kind of nonsensical to believe that technology in the past is similar to today. I do believe it is very clear that our technological advancement today is far superior to that of the past. Yeah, we can just talk about modern medicine for one. Um, I'm gonna leave here in a few minutes. I have to do something, but I think that maturity cannot simply be defined by physical abilities, but also by mental and emotional stability, which is largely dictated by the circumstances which one faces. In a more simple society, one cannot one is more easily adapted to that society, right? Like if I live in a rural zone, like so, for example, if you grew up in a rural place, where the only job that you literally had was to tend to sheep. Now, I'm not going to bash sheep herders. Okay, that is a job. It's something that people need to do. Okay, but it's not the same as developing a program or an advanced AI or having the background knowledge to do those things, right? Like anyone can really tend sheep if they're trained long enough. Same way, it's like if you worked at like a fast food restaurant, that's not high skill labor. Do you know what I'm saying? So you don't need to train for that very long. Most people within a certain age range can learn how to do those things. Um, But if you were to tell me that, you know, somebody from a sheep herder could learn in the same amount of time that they learn how to tend sheep, they could learn how to run a Fortune 500 company. I'm sorry, I would say that's ludicrous. Um, yes, they require management of sheep. Waalaikum salam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I do have some classic stuff on hand and amiibos somewhere in the background there. You can see my whole Splatoon amiibo collection there underneath my Gallica sign. I have some Mario amiibos sitting up there at the top on the right-hand side next to my main game collection. I did recently pick up the Nintendo Switch OLED Zelda edition. That's hiding over there. So, yes, again, let me be very clear to everyone here, because I think you need to understand that I'm not demeaning per se these sort of positions. Again, there's nothing wrong with them. I'm just saying that for us to complain, when I say something's more complex, it doesn't necessitate that it is quote unquote better. Complexity itself does not insinuate value. I'm just saying that because the more complex nature of society, we cannot adapt in the same way, right? It's not feasible, right? In the same way that you can't, like I said, you can't, and you're also comparing the prophets to normal sheep herders, for example. Like the prophets were given knowledge by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a completely different thing. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also illiterate. But today we would not say it's okay to be illiterate, right? Like it's not like something that we want to do. Like I don't want my kids to grow up illiterate because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was illiterate, right? That doesn't make any sense. Like oh, that would be against her benefit. Like, like why would I do that? I want my daughter to be able to read and write, and to learn things. I'm not surprised that the OLED Switch is amazing. Yes, even though it's still old hardware, the screen is really good. Imam Tom, I don't even talk to him, so I don't talk to anyone anymore, to be honest. So I'm sorry, I can't hook you guys up with any. I mean, I know these people, but I haven't messaged them in like billion years. No, yeah, no. I mean, I'm not saying sheep herding is easy. I'm saying that it doesn't take much brain power to comprehend that or to adapt it as an expertise. Uh, I don't know. I can't judge his mental state. I'm not a psychologist, but I will say it's quite disgusting to do that, even if you think that it's some sort of Western psyop. Like you don't like the lack of empathy is quite telling. Yeah, but a 13-year-old can't make 30K in most societies. A 13-year-old can't even get a minimum wage job. A 13-year-old has to be taken care of by their parents. Like it's just the society does not allow them to function at that level. So if you're going to get them married at that level and then they're not even prepared, like even if you're like you say, well, I'm rich and I can pay for my kids, that's not teaching them anything. It's not teaching them any responsibility. You're just saying, here's money, keep having sex and children, and you don't have to ever be responsible for anything. It's like, come on. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. The financial objection is weak. No, you're just not living in reality. I'm sorry. There's nothing weak about it at all. There's nothing weak about it at all. And there's more to the objection than financial stuff. You're not living in reality. You're literally living in a bubble. You have no idea what you're talking about. Like I said, throw any 13-year-old into New York City and see what happens. By themselves, no family, no support. See what happens. They're not going to live for a couple days. It will not be posted online now. You look at any kid in society, it doesn't matter how much you teach them. It doesn't matter anywhere you go in any sort of developed society. You take a 13-year-old boy, most 99% of them, or a 13-year-old girl, and you try to throw them out there, they're not going to live very long. That's a fact. You can try to dispute it, but that's a fact. That's why most minor marriages in contemporary do not function, because they don't function as people. Like it makes no sense that you think that they would, just because they're exceptions to the rule. Doesn't make any sense. Like I said, even if you had your parents to back you up and to help you, okay, then why aren't you marrying two with easily? You make $40,320 a year. Great, good for you. Are you 13? Like this shouldn't even be an argument. Like anyone with common sense and has a kid, has children, knows that this would be ridiculous. Has seen children function in society, would know this is ridiculous. Even if you train them at a young age to be ready, society won't even allow them to get that far. Like it's just not possible. You'd have to literally shift the entire infrastructure, intellectual, financial infrastructure of society in order for them to even survive. And so if you're saying, hey, we're going to get you married early, you're literally setting them up for failure. And you're saying, well, no, it escapes zina. There are other ways to escape zina. You don't have to like throw them into a relationship that they can't even be responsible for. That's like giving a child who can't drive a car, or giving a gun to a kid. And like, you want to argue about children choosing their gender and stuff too early. Fine, good for you. But then you want to sit there and say that they're responsible enough to take care of another person? Like, are you joking? Like, put a shirt on. Well, if you knew anything about fiqh, I do have some haya, because I'm not showing those parts of my body that would be considered to be impermissible. So, you want some more haya? There you go, buddy. Anyways. Mysticism is more like existentialism with a religious flavor. That's what it is. Okay, it's time for me to go. Yes, Moise, but you're talking about an extreme situation here. Again, we have to weigh the consequences here. Is it problematic if a young person has zina? Yes. Are there ways to prevent zina other than to get them married? Yes. Is it possible? Yes. Is it a good idea to throw a person into a relationship that requires them to take care of another person, that requires them to take care of children, even in many respects, that requires them to fulfill rights that they don't even have the possibility of fulfilling because they don't even have a job or are capable of even financially supporting people? They can't even lead prayer or even possibly understand what it means to be a protector and maintainer. And then you want to sit here and say that's not going to cause problems, or that somehow that's going to be less problematic than them committing zina. Because I can tell you right now, we don't know. First off, we don't know that. That's a what if. Okay. Oh, if they're going to go one way or the other. Number two, it is far worse to, I know this is going to sound strange to some of you, it is far worse to build upon sins, even minor ones, than to commit one major one and to repent, or to violate the rights of others and not repent for that, or not be forgiven for that. So if you want to weigh cost and benefits, right, and you say zina, let's be frank, and I know you need to listen to me. If this young boy, for example, who doesn't get married until he's like 20 something, he commits zina once, right? Let's say he goes one timeline, he commits zina once, and repents for that, okay? Then he goes down another timeline where he abuses his wife, he neglects his children, he's not maintaining and protecting, he maybe even commits zina out during the marriage with somebody else because he doesn't understand his responsibilities or is not mature enough to understand, and he commits a number of other sins, right? And many of those sins are violation of other people's rights, and he doesn't repent from that. Which one is worse then, right? Now, either way, it could go either way. He could also get married and never commit zina, never do anything wrong, and it could be perfect, right? But if you want me to weigh cost and benefits, right, I'm not going to support his inability to engage in a proper relationship, a proper marriage, above that other possibility, because there are other ways to negate that other possibility better than the other one. Do you know what I'm saying? So like what I'm trying to say is like it's easier for me to prevent my daughter and my son from committing zina than it is for them to commit sins within a marriage when I don't have authority anymore over her or over my son or my daughter. Because once they're married, they're themselves. That's it. That's their own thing. I no longer can do anything about it. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, and you want me just to throw them in there. I'm not saying you personally, I'm talking about other people, like in general. Like, I'm not going to just give my daughter up like that. See, it's just not possible. No, kid, there's who's typical what? Who are you talking about? Me? I'm saying there's exceptions to every rule. I'm just saying that making it a standard is ridiculous. Because that's not really a marriage, Shoaib. That's just that, and that's not even feasible for a lot of families. Like, it's not possible. I mean, if you're rich, sure, but even then, I think it's problematic. I don't. It's not about being okay or not. It's about whether or not it's okay in every circumstance, and it's not okay in every circumstance. It's okay. It's not okay in most circumstances today. For exceptions, there are always exceptions to rules depending on the society in which you live. So, for example, if you live in a less complicated society where, you know, where there's less of a potential to have harm, or there's more of a support system, then I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm okay with 16, 18, if they want to get married, fine. If they can survive by, within that network and by themselves even. But in most cases, in a lot of societies, especially developed societies, it's not possible. And if you start applying that rule universally, that's ridiculous. You're only causing more harm. So I'm not going to sit here and argue like, oh yes, minor marriages are all okay in every respect. And everything. No, they're not. They're not always okay. It depends, right? You have to be. I know a lot of people listen to this are like, this is too complex. There's too much nuance here. Is no, because that's our fiqh tradition. That's what our fiqh tradition is about. It looks at those exceptions. It looks at the standards. It looks at different circumstances. If you sit here and if I give a fatwa right now saying, yeah, it's okay everywhere for a 13-year-old person to get married or a 16-year-old to get married, I'm actually committing a sin by saying that, because that's false. That's leading to oppression of other people. And I can't even give a fatwa to begin with. I'm just telling you like what the scholars say. If you're a rich family and it's possible, sure, even though I would still question to some extent, because I don't think most people in rich families are mature at that age either, within the societies they grow up in. But if there's exception, there's an exception. Yes, and that's another thing too, is like, Islam did not fix a specific age, even though the scholars did say that by a certain age they should be considered to be adults in both senses. I think it was 17, correct? That was a later period, though. The problem is that in that camp, they're not making that clear because they don't care to make it clear, because they're not interested in teaching people or persuading them. They're interested in owning them. And what I mean by owning is not physically owning. What I mean is like being superior, poning, you know what I mean? Because they're interested in being superior to them and showing their superiority, because they're trying to compensate for an inferiority complex. So yeah, but that's a problem too, is that he should have never accepted the debate to begin with, because it was already losing by even accepting that title, that debate. That was ludicrous, you know. And like I said, that's what I said in one of my posts before. I don't want to talk about this anymore after this, but you know, when you're more concerned about being based than being Islamic, when you're more concerned about being superior to people than teaching them, this is what you get. You end up putting yourself in a position where you screw up because your ego is more important to you than actually bringing people to Islam. And now this debate, you know, makes a lot of people online throw up and not even want to come near Islam, because the way you represented it was basically like, yeah, you know, once you get an erection, you're ready to go. Once she bleeds, she's good. It's like, nope. I'm not going to take part in anything for a while. I don't think I'm ever going to come back, and that's fine. I'm not sad about it. Walaikum salam. And I may be even simplifying exactly what was being stated there, but at the same time, it's like, that's how it was represented. That's how it was said. That is how it was. There was a lack of good communication, lack of coherency, a lack of proper understanding of what the arguments were supposed to be and what the conclusion is. It was just a complete train wreck, because that person was more concerned about appearing strong and blunt and, you know, I don't care about your feelings, more than actually what the facts were and whether or not what he was saying would be beneficial or not. It was just all about, oh, I have to look like a macho man. Oh, look at me bashing the liberals. You're all soft and I'm strong. That's basically the whole method. So empathy is one of the biggest things that we have to do in our dawah. I mean, if you think about it, and the Quran is very specific about this. The Quran says even specifically about Allah, about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says very specifically about the Prophet, had you been harsh with them, they would have left you. And he commends the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for his mercy and his approach, right? So even if the companions can be affected by a lack of empathy, then why are we saying that being lacking empathy is a good thing? It's not a good thing. It's a disgusting thing. Being blunt is fine, but there's a difference between being blunt and being crude, right? And crudeness can even be justified sometimes, but it's always a minority. It's always a minority circumstance in which crudeness is allowed. Primarily, the scholars, the tabi'in, the Sahaba, and the Prophet ﷺ himself were very sophisticated. They were very high class in their behavior, even though they were considered low class by other people outside, you know, by the other civilizations who looked up to themselves and saw themselves as the biggest thing on the planet, right? They acted in a way, they had proper adab, right? They were very high class in their behavior, even when they had nothing, when they were poor and destitute. They were still very high class, you know. And we're not seeing that anymore. Like, even in our debates, it's all about memes and like just getting one-ups and like being crude and obnoxious and juvenile, and it's very disgusting. So, and they say, you know, they make fun of it. They're like, oh, you pulled the adab card, the adab card. You get it. It's like, if you're making fun of adab, wallahi, you are off the manhaj. If you're making fun of adab or akhlaq, if you're making fun of this stuff, if you're saying that this is an excuse, if you're saying that this is nothing that you can be concerned about, that you need to be more concerned about being blunt and harsh and crude and bashing people and shaming people, wallahi, you're off the manhaj. Because that's one of the biggest things, is that character came before anything else in our religion. The scholars used to tell their students that you learn good character first before you learn aqidah, before you learn anything else. And nowadays you have one group of people saying only learn aqidah first, or the other side saying you don't need to learn about character at all because, you know, we have to bash the liberals. And that's the only way they're going to listen to us. That's the only way we're going to be superior is if we start acting more low class than they do. It's like, yeah, okay, bro. Um, I don't know. Because if you don't have proper adab, you don't have proper understanding of how to learn, right? Because that adab also teaches you how to learn properly. It also teaches you how to teach your teachers. I'm sorry, how to treat your teachers, how to treat knowledge, right? So if you don't have proper adab, if you sideline adab before anything else, you actually can't properly learn the other stuff. You can't properly learn usul in any respect, usul al-fiqh, usul anything, okay? You're not even qualified to memorize hadith if you have bad character, because again, and I've talked to you guys about this before, if you're caught lying even outside of your profession, like say if you narrate hadith and you're caught lying, the scholars would regard that as you losing credibility to transmit hadith. Do you understand that? Like, that's a big thing, right? So it's a massive thing if you lack adab, because if you lack adab, then you can't actually even teach or narrate, or, you know, like, it completely erases your credibility. It doesn't necessarily erase the truth of what you're saying, but nobody can accept it from you because you lack adab. That's how severe it is. um and also, again, before I leave, another thing too, not everything is liberalism. Not everything is liberalism. Just because a liberal, for example, might be concerned about their underage daughter or son being married is not liberalism. That could just be fitra. There are things that liberals, I know liberalism is bad, but there could be liberal people out there, and even some liberal ideas, not all of them, that coincide with our faith. Okay, not to say that we should adopt liberalism. Again, in the same way that some people can admit that some red pill ideas make sense, does not necessitate that adopting some liberal sentiments necessarily means that that comes from liberalism. Okay, they could be agreeing with our religion, not the other way around. It could just, again, be common sense. People still have the fitra, even if they come from a different religion. People still have fitra. They still understand what unfairness is. They still be protective of their own children. You can't literally come into a debate and then start laughing and mocking at people for having that fitra, for having that protectiveness over their own kids, and saying, "No, that's liberalism." Astaghfirullah. That's disgusting. Are you joking? Like, come on. Anyways, take that into consideration. Um, I have many critiques of Christian theology and in some of my older articles, and also my videos on atheism. Adab versus lying is different. No, adab is part of akhlaq, because adab is about putting things in their proper place, and akhlaq is about how you behave with others. But adab concerns behavior and perspective on a grand scale, on a general scale. If you want to learn more about adab, I would suggest um, looking into the works of Sayyid Naqib al-Attas with respect to this. Adab is not just good manners. It's much deeper than that, and the scholars wrote about it extensively. Um, like I said, I suggest reading the works of Sayyid Naqib al-Attas regarding this. Adab, for example, would be like taking care of the environment, right? Not polluting, being balanced in your perspective, having wasatiyah, things like this. Being just in the way that you treat people, regardless of whether they're enemy or ally. Um, as a non-Muslim, what are your opposition to liberalism, and what political economic theory do you support? This will be my last answer, I think, because I do have to go. I apologize. I've been a little longer than I need to, but I think this is important. And since you've asked, I will answer. My opposition to liberalism is that liberalism is very much a Eurocentric viewpoint, in that um, that was really reactionary to a lot of the religious institutional oppression at the time, and also monarchical oppression at the time. It is not applied to all societies in all circumstances, number one. Number two, again, it is primarily reactionary in that it emphasizes freedom above all other things, but it only emphasizes freedom in opposition to something else, because freedom can only be emphasized in opposition to something else. It can only be defined that way. And that is problematic because it's not based on any set principles, but only in opposition to something, which is why, in order for liberal societies to sustain themselves, they constantly have to have an enemy, intellectual or physical or otherwise, which is also why that you see, for the majority of time, many liberal societies are at war, because that's how they primarily define themselves, is having physical opposition or intellectual opposition, whether it be communism or any other sort of ism that you could think of. Now, oftentimes it'll structure this in a way that says that it's doing it for its own personal survival, but we've also seen time and time again that's not really the case. It also defines its morality on the basis of what it's in opposition to, and freedom from some sort of oppressive standard. Now, not to say that it's bad necessarily to be free from oppression, but what I'm trying to say is that because liberalism doesn't have any set principles beyond what it's in opposition to, it cannot feasibly sustain itself, because it always has to be reactionary. It has to react to something, right? And this is a problem. Another problem that I have with contemporary liberalism is that, because of its lack of foundation in particular ethics, right? It is constantly adaptable, and it's constantly changing, so that, in a sense, that the moral zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it, is also consistently changing, which I do not find good for any civilization. And we see that historically, many liberal societies do not last very long. The United States is one of the longer lasting ones, but if you look at like most liberal societies, democracies especially, democratic liberal societies, they just don't function very long. They're always constantly going through revolutions, or they're being overturned, and not necessarily by fascism or anything. It's just that, well, although one can make an argument that liberal societies eventually lead to fascism because of the lack of stability, they always look for the other extreme, which is something that you see in society today, even in the United States, for example. So if you look at the U.S., it's slowly reaching that. It's going further and further towards fascism because of that lack of stability, that lack of permanence in terms of moral structure and political structure, even. The far right and the far left are just getting further far and left and right. They're not ever reaching a balance. They continue to move away from it. And this is historical. This is if you look throughout all these liberal societies since the beginning of the Enlightenment, this has been this case over and over and over again, right? And I think it's because of the ideology itself. It's just not fixed in anything. Whereas, despite many of the problems that you had with monarchical societies or even imperial societies, they lasted far longer. Yes, of course, they had their own upheavals, they had their own rebellions, they had their own revolutions, etc. But largely speaking, the structure and the identity of that civilization remained similar for a very long time, hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years even. If we talk about, for example, Islamic civilization, we have a very concrete understanding of what that is. Even in the times of where temporary or transition was occurring. Whereas in liberal societies, we don't see that at all. I mean, the United States that exists today is remarkably different from the one that was 100 years ago. So much so that I think that it's almost indistinguishable. I do live in a modern democracy. Yes, I'm an American by culture. So I think the influx of the converts from the manosphere is, again, I guess it's not my final question. And I have more things to say about liberalism, but that would be the concise definition. The caliphate the caliphate structure lasted for quite some time. There were different caliphs, but the caliphate structure lasted for quite some time. Yes, I'm aware of Middle Nation, and we're actually friends. Yes, he has lied on numerous occasions. Okay, so last question. Now it's last question. Last question. What do you make of the influx of converts in the manosphere background? I make of that is that it's going to be a fulfillment of the prophecy that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned with regard to the corruption of knowledge over time. Now, today you have this really strange theory going around that the corruption of knowledge will occur on the basis of of all these so-called compassionate imams and all these imams that are being corrupted and trying to like be liberals and stuff. That's not the case. The hadith are very clear about what's going to happen in the end times regarding knowledge. And that first off, it's going to be the death of scholars. That's going to lead to the corruption of knowledge. And what? The rise of the lay people as authorities. The rise of the lay people as authorities. Again, let me repeat that. The rise of lay people as authorities over knowledge. It is not going to be because of scholars and students of knowledge that corrupt the deen. The corruption of knowledge will happen at the hands of the common people. The hands of the common people in absence of the scholars. What we are seeing today is the influx of populism into this ummah through like this manosphere crap, right? Give me a minute. I'll look it up for you right now. Yeah, let me go. Give me a minute. I will give it to you in a moment here. Blah. I wouldn't say it's haram per se, but I'm saying that it's basically what's going to happen. It's basically leading up to that. Give me 1 minute. I do have it here. I have the reference on hand. I promise you, brothers and sisters, I have the reference. I do not say things without dalil. MashaAllah. At least to the best of my ability. Here it is. Okay. So the hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari. It's Sahih al-Bukhari 100, book 3, hadith number 42. Chapter 34, how the religious knowledge will be taken away. I heard Allah's messenger saying, Allah does not take away the knowledge by taking it away from the hearts of the people, but takes it away by the death of the religious learned men, till when none of the religious learned men remains, people will take as their leaders ignorant persons who, when consulted, will give their verdict without knowledge, so they will go astray and will lead the people astray. That is the So it is not the scholars themselves that are being blamed, not like you hear today from certain people. The reference I'm putting here, 3 Hadith 42, and that should be in Sunnah. I'm going to find the actual link here. Take away the knowledge. Okay, Sunnah.com. That's related to the question because when we see the rise of the manosphere, we see a lot of ignorant, low-class individuals coming to the deen now, perpetuating, projecting their own opinions onto it and following it on the basis of being an anti-feminist or being based. And you see a lot of these low-class individuals starting to become icons among the youth. I just had it here. What am I doing? Take away the... Okay. Oh, I found it. Well, it's in Sunan Ibn Majah as well. But let's take it from... Oh, it's also Sahih Muslim. Do you mind which one it's... Okay, well, I'll just give you the one that I referenced here. Okay, so here's the link. Have fun. There's the link. You can also find in Sahih Muslim and Ibn Majah. Not Sahih Ibn Majah. Blech, Sunan Ibn Majah. I have attempted to reconcile my differences before, but the other individual basically spit on me and lied about me and everything in order to protect himself from criticism. It's only, I mean, it would be great if Islam had an effect on them, and we pray for that. But at the same time, we're finding that we're finding that these individuals were only praised for their conversion because of the sins and the haram and a lot of the things that they were doing before that were not Islamic. They were being praised for that, and they're still being praised for that, despite the fact that they have not repented for those things openly. And again, that's between them and Allah. But when you're, for example, if you, let me just put it this way, again, I'm just to be frank here, as a revert myself. When I reverted, I was still sinning about certain things, okay, because I was a revert, I was still learning, right? Now, but in the process of that, nobody in my community praised me for my sins. They didn't praise me for that. I didn't, and I had enough shame not to expose myself or expose the things that I was still doing like I was doing when I was a non-Muslim, because I was still learning. So when I made a mistake, if they saw me making a mistake, they would pull me to the side and they would talk to me with mercy and compassion. They would say, "Hey, look, this is not what you should be doing, brother. We should be doing this way." And I would be like, "Okay, that's how I learned." Right? That's the community I grew up in as a revert. Today, you could walk around smoking a cigar with your shirt off, listening to rap music, pimpins and hoes, and still talking about how you're the greatest influence on the world and how you're the same as Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, and how them hoes need to be put in line, and how you're a failure if you don't have a lot of money, and that's okay. Like, oh, brothers, no, he's still a revert, so he's just reverted, so let's just let it go. It's like you have no shame for the religion if you're not even pulling him to the side saying, "Hey, dude, you got to stop this." Right? No, they praise that behavior. They say that's cool, that's manly, that's Chad, that's based. This is not the same community that I grew up in. Yes, and if they said they testified that he left all those sins, that's good. But the person is still doing things that would be regarded as sinful in our faith, and for some strange reason, we're condoning that because he's not a woman and he's not a feminist. But if a sister like has her hair partly out, she gets called a feminist whore in front of everyone on Twitter, gets bashed. If she doesn't like some of this behavior that's being projected onto her, if she says even one thing in disagreement with these individuals, she's accosted like she's a piece of dirt. And she may have been Muslim longer than this individual is, right? We have no ghaira for our own women. We have more ghaira for this dude than we have for our own women. I don't think it's a big win. It's a Pyrrhic victory. Because if you're not attracted to somebody because of Islam, if you're attracted to them for something that is non-Islamic, then eventually you will corrupt your Islamic understanding. They insult her, yes, her father, her current or future children, her current whatever. They tell her that she's going to live with 20 cats and never get married, that she's useless, that she's like aged milk. Now you guys think that I'm being a feminist. Some of you think that I'm being a feminist because I care about sisters, but you have to understand I have a 2-year-old daughter. You think I want my own daughter being treated like that? Do any of you have daughters or even sisters? Would you like any of them to be treated with those words just because they make a mistake? Astaghfirullah. Come on, man. It has nothing to do with being a feminist. It's about having some ghaira for your family members, for the sisters. It's about having love and compassion and protectiveness over women, bro. That's not being a simp. That's just being a good person. So some of you need to, not people in the chat, I'm talking to other people viewing this. You need to relax. Being a human being, okay, learn. These sisters are scared of you. They're upset at a lot of the men because not people in the chat, I'm talking to other people out there. You act like a bunch of sociopaths. Like, it's not about whether, Shoaib, it's not about whether or not Tate has something better to offer. I hope he does have something better to offer. My problem is that he was not being approved of because of the best that he had to offer. He was being approved of the worst that he had to offer before, a lot of it. And I think that showcases that there's a problem within our community, right? Um, Anyways, okay, I definitely have to leave. But anyways, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for listening to me rant. Inshallah, I'll see you guys later. I pray that you're all well. Okay, Eid Mubarak, belated Eid Mubarak, by the way. All right, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.